I remember when I met my first patient, that was 3 weeks into my clinical training. Whatever theory I knew was so abstract that it probably had no relevance to what this person told me during the first encounter. I had to reinvent my own theory. I had to come up with what's going to work. And I found that a lot of theories, they're helpful in understanding, but they may not ultimately be what I will be doing. And that's why I actually found it very helpful to have supervision that involved recording of my sessions. My earlier supervisions recorded all of my sessions, and then it was reviewed very carefully. And I realized that what I was thinking about what was happening in sessions and what was actually happening in those sessions were many times two very different realities. I suspect I evolved since those days. This was probably back in my early 20s, and today I probably have a little bit more idea, but I'm also humbled by this understanding that I really don't know everything, and I don't know sometimes what's really happening, and it takes a lot of effort to understand what's really happening between two individuals. A lot of what is happening could be very intuitive, and what I suspect is the reason for change ultimately may not be the only one and may not be the main one for change, and that's something to just be open to. That said, theory could be quite helpful because it could generate alternative ways of thinking and approaching the reality, as long as I'm not treating it with certainty, as if I treat it as a gospel that gives me all the answers and this is the only way to approach patients, etc. But it could work also as a helpful device.
Right. I don't know if you can think of any example that is far enough or like modulated away from reality where you can show, the art of it, because
I mean, I think one of the questions that we talk about is that the relationship between the science of psychotherapy and the art of psychotherapy, and a lot of times people talk about that there is a science and they talk about research, and then talk about art and they talk about more intuitive aspect of psychotherapy. People wrote books about this, and I think that both parts are really important. With intuitive aspect of psychotherapy, it does happen sometimes that we have a particular sense of something being different or off or unusual about the patient, even though the therapy session may be progressing as usual. And sometimes if we pay attention to this, it could be quite important. I had a patient that was describing a social interactions but I felt that there was something very different about how this patient was describing those social interactions. And there was something unusual that made me actually worried, that I felt that there was something not connected or different. And I remember asking this patient, what was that about? And after a pause, we found that this patient was developing a very serious and lethal suicidal plan that actually was developed in the previous few months. And I've heard nothing of that from this patient, even though we talked about everything else. And that was life-saving for this patient, that we had a discussion. I learned that paying attention to those very little details and my personal reactions and intuitive sense of something being off or being worried and not feeling that things are connected was really important in this particular treatment, but it's important in many other treatments. We can't always notice those things. We miss a lot of them, but when we do notice them, I think it's important to think. And
right, I mean, it's your job, really.
It is my job,
It's your
really.
job to do that.
Yes, that's true.